Hello and welcome to Building Solid Foundations. I am your host, Steve Matley, president of Coast to Coast Equities Incorporated, and today we're going to talk about a topic that's close to my heart because I believe our education system is doing a very poor job at this one, and that is teaching people personal financial literacy, how to take care of their own money. It's a skill that everybody needs to do, and most people have no idea where to start. So today, joining me as an expert, she is a professional organizer and a financial literacy expert. Welcome, Karen Brothers.
Thank you for having me.
Karen, I know that you have been down this journey yourself personally. You have taken this path and lived this life, and I want to share a little bit with our audience of your journey of learning and applying personal financial literacy.
Absolutely. So like every American, I bought into the credit card industry. Freshman in college, got my first credit card, right? And a loyal member for so many years, and you take pride in that.
That's right.
But you don't realize how much it's affecting your life, and you're depending on this credit. That's not really helping you, it's kind of holding you back. So for years, I lived that kind of a lifestyle, and I got to a place where I had more debt than I wanted, and I definitely wanted to change things. And I'd heard about Dave Ramsey. I read one of his books, Total Money Makeover. A lot of really great information, although at that time I just had read the book and kind of flipped through the pages, and I wasn't really applying everything that he teaches. I just thought it was great information, and I thought I could really see helping people with this information. And so a few years later, I had the opportunity to take his class, which is a 9-week class, and put those steps into action myself and begin to see a change in my finances, and then also lead the class to help others, because I do have a heart for helping people get their finances in order so that they can relieve that stress. Okay,
and so if you're teaching the class, you've seen people that are probably in very dire situations, holes they've dug financially. So how bad can this get for people?
Oh, really bad. Some people, depending on what age they are and where they are in the process, like they could be close to retirement and realize that they just don't have enough, and that can really be stressful. And young people who are having children and they don't really see how the whole picture fits together for finances, and they just need some help seeing the big picture and getting the steps in place.
Okay, and I know a lot of people, even if they don't look like it on the surface, they are always one paycheck away from basically losing whatever they have. And,
right.
They have a large payment every month to a credit card that's just covering interest. It's not paying down the principal.
Right. I don't know the exact statistic, but it's like 75-80% of people live paycheck to paycheck.
All right, and that's scary.
It is.
We had a downturn about 10, 15 years ago, and we know that it comes around again every so often. Every couple of decades we get another downturn or recession. So it's not a matter of will it happen, it's a matter of when will it happen, and if people are not ready. And I personally believe the biggest problem in the last downturn that hurt so many people is they weren't prepared. And I remember I was in Temecula, and that was a fairly affluent community for the inland area. And I remember being in line at a grocery store and watching a lady buy her groceries and use 4 different cards to buy her groceries. And I then take the groceries and put it in the Mercedes, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so designer purse, but no money in the purse, right? Designer car, can't afford the car payment, using credit cards, multiple credit cards, all maxed out to buy the family groceries. So this is not going to end well. And I felt bad for her, and my thought was, I bet you nobody's ever taught her these type of principles. So part of the question here is, do we have to live a completely austere life?
No, absolutely not. So the first thing you do is create a budget.
Okay.
You have to know how much money you have coming in, and then what are you spending it on. But if you like lobster, you can budget in a lobster meal. Like, it doesn't have to be all...
Just not every day at the most expensive restaurant in town.
Exactly, exactly. You just want to tell your money where to go, knowing how much you have to tell where to go, and then categorize everything. So for a period of time, maybe you need to be on a tight budget to get where you want to be, to get out of debt. But in general, no.
Okay, so essentially, if you do this right, and you're an organizer by trade,
yes,
and so this is simply organizing your money, so you know where it is, what it's doing, and you don't run out of it.
Exactly.
Okay, and if you want to have lobster, your budget as you manage it will tell you how often you can have lobster.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
And certain expenses are going to come up during the year. Christmas, same date every single year, right?
And yet it surprises people, doesn't it?
And it's not a surprise, right? Like if you have kids, they're growing, they're going to need new clothes for school and that sort of thing like that.
And they all have a birthday each year.
They do. And there are things that we can plan for that oftentimes we don't. And then we feel like that's an emergency. So we need our credit card, but it could be handled differently.
Right. And I know a lot of people, after Christmas season is over, they're paying that credit card off maybe till almost the next Christmas.
Very likely, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, trying to figure out why they can't afford to go on a vacation.
Right.
Summer, right.
Right. And feeling like all the things that they're purchasing at Christmas are absolutely needed. Their family needs all of these things
because everybody else has them.
Because everyone else has them, exactly.
I lived in a house that was built in 1951 at one time. It was in East San Diego County. And I remember lamenting to my next door neighbor, who was an older guy. He was the second owner of his house, had bought it in 1958. And I said, why would they build a house with only 50 amps of power and one outlet in the kitchen? What are these people thinking? They said, you need to understand, when this house was built in 1951, we didn't have all this stuff to plug in. There was no cell phones, there was no computers. The kitchen appliances were limited to a toaster mostly.
Wow.
They hadn't even developed most of the electric blenders and mixers and those things. Those came out during the 50s. And by the end of the 50s, there was a lot of them. And he also said, we didn't need closets because at Christmas time, each kid would get a gift. And it's usually a useful gift. And then other gifts were things like orange and a little bit of candy or deck of cards or something like that.
Something that fit in a stocking.
That's right, in a stocking. And he said, there's no way, that's how houses have to be so huge now because we need enormous storage space. We need 200 amps of power to power up all our electronics with the TVs and all the stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting insight from someone that had lived through that. Now, savings. How important is having a savings account?
Savings account is paramount because you will have emergencies. It's not if, it's when.
And Christmas is not an emergency.
No, it's not an emergency.
Okay.
So having an emergency fund, first of all, kind of different from just general savings, but an emergency fund set aside specifically in case flat tire or something with the house breaks and you need to replace it. So something that is going to happen at some point, it will happen, and that money is set aside. You don't dip into it for a new boat. You don't dip into it for a new purse. It's just set aside. Okay. And then you have this peace of mind. Like, it's always going to be there. You're going to be safe. When an emergency comes up, you don't have to have the stress of having to deal with the emergency and the money of it.
And is it more important to have the emergency fund first or the savings account first?
I would say the emergency fund.
Okay.
And then once you have that in place, additional savings is just that. It's additional.
Okay. And then if you have both, an emergency comes up, would you look at dipping into the savings to cover that before you dip into the emergency fund? Even if, let's say, you had pipes blow in your house or something like that, you had to replace some bathroom stuff, but you had enough in the savings account to cover it. Would you advocate that, or just go to the emergency fund and use that?
I think either way would be fine, because if you're dipping into the emergency fund to pay for an emergency, then you'll want to replenish that anyway. So I think it's pretty much the same.
Okay, very good. And then, as you mentioned, so many people are, you said 75% of people living paycheck to paycheck. That emergency fund the emergency could be a layoff.
Exactly. And so, what's recommended is a 3 to 6 month of your expenses emergency fund. So basically, if something were to happen, like a layoff, then you could go for 3 to 6 months, depending on how much you've saved, without income because you've saved that much. Now, during that time, you're not eating lobster. You are on a strict budget.
Eating tuna fish.
Tuna fish, right? Okay. But that's going to help you get through and help relieve the stress while you're looking for a new job.
Okay, and that means depending where you live, that could be a different amount. So us living in California on the coast, that 3 to 6 month fund will be 3 to 4 times higher than someone living in the Midwest somewhere.
Right. And it also depends on what your expenses are. Like if you have a car that's paid for, that's one less expense versus if you are still paying on a car loan, that sort of thing. And
that's an important point. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about that part of it, getting rid of the payments we have every month so that we don't need to have such a large emergency fund and savings account.
Yes.
And we can live on less. We're going to take a short break. We're talking about financial literacy with Karen Brothers. She's a professional organizer and a personal literacy expert. Don't go anywhere. We have a lot to cover. We'll be right back.
If you love them enough to relearn math so you can teach them math, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
You made your house a reality. Homeschooling yourself on loans, color-coding listings, and flushing every toilet in a 20-mile radius. If you can ace house hunting, you can do it for retirement. Get on track with tips at aceyourretirement.org.
Hi, welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. Today we are talking about personal financial literacy with our expert, Karen Brothers. And we've been discussing the idea of not being a slave to your credit cards. We've talked about having an emergency fund and a savings account because we can't predict the future. We just know things will go wrong at some times. So we're going to get into now, right before the break, Karen mentioned the idea of how much you have in savings is going to depend upon how much you have to pay every month in your bills. And that brings us to the next point is, how do we get rid of a lot of those bills? So Karen, a lot of people, they have car payment, maybe multiple car payments. They have their rent or their mortgage. They have insurance to pay. They may have a lot of other bills like, say, cable. They have their Netflix and their Hulu accounts. They've got their Verizon bill for their cell phones, right? One thing after another, that Apple Music, all these things that are every month coming out of their account. How do we reduce the amount of our living expenses each month so when we have 3 to 6 months worth of emergency backup, it doesn't have to be an enormous sum of money?
Right. So I think there's two things going on there. One, when you have an emergency, it's only going to be for a short amount of time, hopefully.
Right.
So you wouldn't necessarily need to reduce your expenses so that they would be less during an emergency, so to speak. So I think reducing them to what is within your budget, like within your income, is the primary goal.
Okay.
And then as much as you can pay off, like a car loan or any other type of credit card bill, that type of thing, and not continue to add to it, that's going to reduce your budget, what's your expenses in your budget. So then when you do have an emergency, there's less that's going out. Does that make sense?
So let's say I'm in one of those jobs where I am convinced I have to have a car that's no more than 2 or 3 years old. Because let's say I'm a real estate agent, I take people around to houses, they're not going to be impressed with an agent that's driving a 7-year-old car. How do I ever get that paid off, or is it important to have that late model car?
Well, again, I think that some jobs do cater more toward having a nice car because you have clients that you're driving around. So I think taking care of a car, keeping it in good condition, doesn't mean it always has to be brand new. Okay. I would say that. And then also, if that's what you need professionally, first of all, it should be a write-off. And then secondly, I would say just have it as part of your budget and make sure that it fits within your income. Okay, so
some of this is learning how to, if we're doing business with our vehicle, then we should be treating it like a business and approaching the professionals like a tax accountant or a tax attorney to get the advice, how do I structure this correctly?
Exactly. Take advantage of any business deductions that you can.
Okay, and then that would be coming out of it's part of what's necessary to generate the income. Yes. All right, but now credit cards, we were told that you really can't live without them in our society now. If you don't have credit cards, how do you rent a car? How do you book an airplane flight? How do you check into a hotel? Is it necessary to have a credit card?
It isn't actually necessary. Okay. You can have a debit card with a Visa, MasterCard logo on it, right? So you can do all those things online that you're doing with a credit card. And you even can, a lot of times people say, I can't rent a car, but there are ways around it having a credit card. Okay. And a lot of times people say, oh, I pay it off at the end of the month. That's great if you pay it off at the end of the month. But what people might not realize is that when you're using plastic, when you don't actually have cash money that you're giving to somebody, you tend to spend more.
That's true.
Because you're not feeling that money leaving your wallet. Right. But if you actually were paying cash for things, then you would probably think more about your purchases.
That's true. And if I go to shopping somewhere, Target, Walmart, someplace where I'm getting a lot of things, food and house accessories, those kind of things, if I'm using cash and I brought my $100 bill with me, I'll be counting things up as I put them in the cart. Right. So they don't have the embarrassment of having $102 ring up at the register and going, I'm short. If I'm using the card, I'm not even worried about it.
Right.
And I'll slide that'll be 150 when I get to the register.
But if you're using a debit card, that's still plastic, but you know that there's a finite amount of money
That's right.
on that card versus a credit card. Well, I mean, that's finite too, but it's usually a lot higher.
Right. And I think it ties in together because you mentioned renting the card. Now, you can rent cars without the credit card if they use a debit, but they'll put a very large hold, which means there has to be money in there. But if we have that savings account tied to it to back it up, that's not a problem.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It solves that problem, and we're not paying the interest. And some credit cards you pay whether you charge anything on them or not.
Right.
You just pay every year just for the privilege of carrying it in your wallet.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm not saying you couldn't have a credit card, but to be wise, using your credit card wisely, there's a fine line. People think, oh, I'm doing fine with it, and then you get out of control.
Okay.
You don't notice that you're getting out of control. So,
Okay. But if I use the credit card, I earn points. And when I earn points, I get free vacations. Is that actually a legit deal? Does that work?
it's a really good marketing scheme, right?
Okay.
So are you spending that much more when you go to Target on your card than you're getting back in points?
Okay.
So you have to look at what am I spending extra that I wouldn't be spending otherwise, and is that what I'm getting as a return? For instance, one card I saw a commercial for, you got 1% back, and the actor promoting the card was like super excited, and I'm going, it's 1%. Like that just...
And the interest on that card is about 20%.
Exactly.
So if I miss my payment this month, I
Yes.
don't cover everything, they're going to charge me 20% more than what I bought. So now I've just got 20% less than what I could have bought, but I got a 1% bonus on the back end.
Yeah.
Yeah, so first grade math would tell us that's not the best deal.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. And I think it's interesting for people because I've heard a lot of people justify that. They earn flyer miles, they earn bonus points. I got this vacation for free because I used this card, and they don't realize they spent $3,500 in interest in order to get that $2,500 vacation.
Right. Right. Nobody ever got rich off airline points.
Okay. Now where do we start? Because I know a lot of people, they point, they say, it's all I can do to cover the bills I have. There's no way I could ever get out from underneath this. I can't pay an extra $10 on my credit card. I can't put any in savings account. Where do we start?
Right. So to get some traction, you look around and see, is there anything I have of value that I can sell and get some extra cash flow into my budget?
Okay.
That will help. Also, sometimes people need to pick up a second job, just like a part-time job, to, again, add some extra income so that they can feel some progress toward their goals. And once you get the snowball rolling, you'll have momentum and you'll begin to be more focused, I think, and then things you were spending money on aren't going to be as important as reaching your goal.
Okay, so when I hear that, I'm thinking, okay, at home, I'm tracking with you so far, Karen, and I like what you're saying. I'm learning this, but you just told me I have to actually change something in my life. I have to go get a second job. I have to sell some material goods. Now you went past teaching, and I'm into meddling with my life now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a commitment. You actually have to make a decision and commit to this if you want it to happen. And so when people say, I have no way of getting out of this, maybe what they're saying is, I am not willing to commit to what it takes to get out of this. Is that right?
Possibly. But the very first thing that we haven't talked too much about is creating a budget.
Okay, so have a plan.
People don't even really know what they're spending their money on. So that's the first thing, because you can discover money you can discover you have money that you can put toward bills that you may not have realized because you just didn't know where it was going. So that first step can just reveal a lot for somebody. But yeah, once you see your budget and once you create a plan, you have to choose to work it.
Okay, and the thing I've seen with budgets there are people that they don't count right. They believe budget's a four-letter word.
Right.
I've heard that. I've heard people believe that budget is a control and restricting mechanism, right? And there's people that believe they have a budget, but they're really not honestly tracking all this stuff.
Right.
They wrote down the stuff that they wrote, that there's rent and there's insurance, but they've neglected all the Starbucks and the smoothie shop and the accessory store and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
They forget all those little things, right?
Yes. But they need to know that a budget is your friend. A budget is going to help you reach your goals.
Okay.
You work together with your budget.
So you have to be brutally honest with yourself and actually track every penny you spend. Write it down, categorize it, and then understand what can I get rid of. And I think it's a lot like people that start diets and they have to write everything they eat every day, and they're actually shocked at what they actually did eat compared to what they thought they had eaten.
Right. And so just in the beginning, it's going to feel difficult because you are doing behavior change.
That's right.
And you're probably restricting yourself more. But once you see the goals that you're going after, and then once you achieve those goals, then your behavior is already changed, and you just have a different mindset about money and about what you need and what you want. You have a better understanding of the difference.
Okay.
So I think in the beginning, it can be hard, and having an accountability partner who is straight with you is really good for that.
Great. On that, we're going to have to take a short break again. We're going to come back and we're going to wrap this conversation up. I want to talk about some issues related to buying versus renting and those type of things. This is Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We'll be right back.
If you love them enough to relearn math so you can teach them math, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
You made your house a reality. Homeschooling yourself on loans, color-coding listings, and flushing every toilet in a 20-mile radius. If you can ace house hunting, you can do it for retirement. Get on track with tips at aceyourretirement.org.
Hi, welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. Today I am joined by Karen Brothers. She is a professional organizer and financial literacy expert, and we've been talking about getting your finances in order, just the basics of how to manage your own money so that you're managing it and it's not managing you. And so, Karen, when we left off, we said we were going to talk a little bit about just kind of wrap this whole thing up. And we talked a little bit about some of the behavior changes we have to do. And I want to get back to a little bit more technical stuff. And there's discussions in this field about, do you buy, do you rent your place to live? And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. So when you're buying something, you're investing in a property, and renting, a lot of people think I'm throwing my money away.
Okay.
And in some cases that's true, but renting is not always bad. Like if you're moving to a new place and you're not exactly sure where you want to live, it's good to rent for a while until you find the best place to then invest your dollars.
Become familiar with the market. Right.
Become familiar with the market, right. And then some professions have you moving around every few years, right? So you don't want to buy a house and then not be able to sell it when you have to transfer.
Okay.
So renting in some cases, depending on your job, might also be just a better way to go.
Okay, and I know there's military families that get deployed every 2 to 3 years,
right.
Which can work for them if they buy and then get on an up cycle, but if they're in a down cycle, that can work against them.
Right.
Okay, and then I wanted to talk a little bit with you about, when teaching with people, there's couples that come in.
Yes.
Now, they jointly own their resources.
Yes.
And sometimes you'll have one spouse who's gung-ho for this thing, and they're thinking, we really need to get this on track. I'm committed to do this. The other spouse is being dragged along and saying, I don't want to do this whole thing. I think what you're trying to do is take all my fun away. I think you're trying to restrict me. I think it's a control thing. So how do we get people on the same page? Because obviously this can't work if two people aren't talking together on this.
Absolutely. It does not work when two people are going in different directions. So hopefully your partner would want to get your finances in order, work together to do that. But you're right, sometimes they feel like you're restricting them and now they can't have fun anymore.
Right.
But I think, first of all, if they were to take a class together, there would be a third person presenting the information.
Right.
So then they're hearing it from an objective party.
Okay, and that's where the book and the training sessions come in that you're part of.
Right, exactly. You're going to be on this stricter budget for a while, but then once you get to your goals, then you can have as much freedom as you want. So I think it's just in the beginning, if you can help your partner understand that in the beginning, yes, it's going to be difficult, but there's so much reward once you get there.
And if you go to the classes, usually the people that are teaching this have been through the process.
Yes.
And so now you've got their testimonies to help people to understand this is where you end up. So yes, it may be a little uncomfortable starting this process off, and a little uncomfortable getting through it, but at the end, you're in a much better place than you were before. You might actually sleep at night without worrying whether you're going to lose your house, or what happens if I get laid off, or what happens if the car blows up.
Because finances are such a stress in a marriage, in a partnership, and if you can come together over finances and get on the same page for finances, it can do wonders for your marriage.
Yeah, that money is the number one issue that tends to be the wedge issue in most relationships. So I think it's very important that when we get information from experts who are third party, second, we understand the outcome, listening to people that have been through it, and third, we have people that we can turn to when we're stuck, when we're struggling, when we're thinking, okay, I know we agreed to do this, but this is just getting really difficult, and they can encourage us and help us, and maybe say, maybe you were too aggressive in your goal, and maybe we'll back that off a little bit. We'll keep working towards it, but maybe we need to back that off a little bit and ease it up. We'll just take a little longer to get there. But if it's strangling you at this point, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So if I want to get more information on this, what would I do? Where would I find this kind of information? Because it's not taught. I'd say it's really not taught in our culture very much.
Right, it's not. So Dave Ramsey has a program, it's Financial Peace University.
Okay.
You can take that, it's a 9-week class. They're offered all the time in the community. You could just go to his website and search for a class in your area and probably find, 3 or 4 that are going on right now at any given time. He also has books that he's written which present the same information. It's a little bit different because then you're just kind of reading it at home.
That's right.
But yeah, online he has a radio show that it's a call-in show. So people all over the country call in and they say, this is my situation, what do you recommend? And so listening to that, like you were saying, hearing other people's stories, there's somebody in your same boat, right?
Right.
And you get to hear what they're going through and what he recommends just over and over again. You can have that encouragement while you're on this journey.
Okay. And for the people at home, a lot of people know that my company, we use a lot of investors in our projects. We do land flips, we bring money in, and it's high ROI and it's wealth building. And a lot of people wonder, how do you find people that have money to do this? Well, a lot of them have gone through these type of programs. They've got out of debt, they've put money aside, and they actually have emergency fund, savings account, and money they can invest.
Yes.
And then they can really start growing things. And eventually the goal is to no longer be financially dependent. So I want to thank you, Karen, for being on our show today. Karen Brothers, professional organizer and a financial literacy expert. Next, make sure you tune in each and every week. Bring a notebook. You're going to learn a lot every single time. We hope this helped build the solid foundation of your financial future. I'm Steve Matley. We'll see you next.
Ah.